put your spirit fingers down, love those. Push your paper clip off to the side. Let's do the whole class tally. Blue versus red Dahlia, thank you for sitting so nicely. Amanda goes for you guys too. Doing a nice job. Okay, let's hear from our teams. Table 1, blue and red. I hope we're listening, folks, or is that you, Jordan, just bringing them up to speed? Okay, please whisper. Shocking. I hope we're being true to our results. Table 3, you're sitting nicely. Let's come to you guys. Louisa? Still working on it? Oh, you got it. Three blue, 1 red. Table 4. Again, trio. Hope you guys signed up for the talent show. Table 5. Blue 2, red 2. Blue 2, red 2. A lot of blue 3, red 1. What did I miss? Joseph? Okay. I hope we're listening, folks. And finally, table 2. Red 1. Boys, how do you do? Only 4 times. I know you just came in. What'd you get? Hope we're listening, Alexa. Hello. Hello. Get here, Dustin. You were supposed to spin it 4 times. So if you spin it 4 times and 2 times you landed on red, how many times must you have landed on blue? Okay.
Okay. Sorry. So take a few minutes, or not a few minutes, but a minute or so, and think about, again, we're just focusing on Standard 1 and Standard 5. So content knowledge, what would you rate this person? And then Standard 5, positive classroom environment, what kind of a score do you believe this person would earn?
And I think it's going to be helpful for you to first say, was student learning happening? Was that a good lesson? Or was student learning not happening and that wasn't a good lesson? And then look for evidence of that. But start from an overall impression. Okay, I know you could study this for a long, 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 long time and talk yourself out of this score and into that score and vice versa, but we're going to move on. So just let's see what Desi says the score is. How about that? Okay. For this elementary math video, they're saying for standard 1, a score of 3. Does anybody agree with that? Oh. You're saying you saw more of the application part of the lesson and not the instructional part? No, what are you saying? Gotcha. Good point. Okay, here's the evidence that the team came up with, that there were opportunities to process in groups. Well, but remember, that was one of the bullets under Standard 1 for Level 3. So go back to your bullets, okay? That, again, referring back to the bullets, got it? That there were accurate and relevant examples provided, and again, that was one of the bullets. And the majority of the students were engaged in talking about the content. Then I think there's that pause there because this goes back to what you're saying, that there was limited vocabulary use, that there was limited math terminology being used. And there also wasn't a lot of opportunity to dialogue about the findings. After she collected all the data, then there wasn't a lot of discussion in place about what they had discovered, what similarities or differences there were. Okay, let's look at, oh, no. Did I miss Standard 5? Okay, for Standard 5, this team also gave a score of 3. And for the reasons given, that this student was monitoring student behavior, she was moving about the classroom, she intervened, redirected children as needed. There was a variety of strategies that she used to regain attention, that there was a positive climate and some positive feedback provided, some praise. The negative aspect of what we viewed was that there was some correcting students in front of their peers. Yes? Well, that's a good point, except in Standard 5, I don't see that as a bullet anywhere. I know. I'm glad you're bringing these points up because it's not an exact science, as you might be noting. So it's very difficult to come up with inter-rater reliability for that reason. But we wanted to share with you what the team's results were. But thanks for bringing up your questions.
I think, if I could just interject real quickly, I think maybe what they were saying in terms of correcting student in front of peers might relate back to under the 0 score column, lack strategies for monitoring student behavior. We know as skilled teachers that it's a best practice to redirect students either away from the group or in the hall or privately, quietly, not in front of the whole class. So it may be that they're making an implied reference through just some different
And Frank,
phraseology.
I've seen this video a couple of times, and frankly, I don't even recall when that happens, that a student was disciplined or called out in front of the rest of the group. So I'm not saying it wasn't there, but it didn't raise to my level of awareness. Yes.
So maybe we could do a show of hands for standard 1. How many of you rated that person a 3? You can kind of take a look around, maybe about a third or so. What about anybody rate them a 4? What about 2? So a large majority. Anybody give them a 1 rating? Okay. What about a 0? Anybody score that person a 0? And standard 5, same thing. What about, how many gave that person a score of a 3? Okay. What about a 4? Anyone? How about 2? So it's about a third gave them a 3 and 2/3 maybe gave them a 2. Anybody give a 1 score? Or a 0? Well, you guys are, okay. It'd be great if we could take a field trip to a classroom, and we all do. Oh. Sorry. Just to rephrase what she said, it's difficult to capture everything going on in a video and be sure that you're able to see everything. So, yes. Thank you. And her comment was that hopefully you know your student by that a little bit anyway as you go into these observations, so you can kind of predict or have a sense of how to support them with what what you're seeing, as opposed to these videos where it's just it's a Kodak moment and you have to react accordingly. In the back, sir. Thank you. His comment was that it might have been easier to focus just on one standard for a few moments and then one descriptor. Okay, thank you. Gotcha. Okay, so looking at the descriptors one by one and giving some sort of a ranking or rating that way. It's great feedback because, you know, as we mentioned earlier, this is a field test year, so there's lots of growth for this process as well as for ourselves as raters.
And when I noticed how many raised their hand for 3 and there were a lot more that raised it for 2, we had the same types of responses when we were at the training ourselves. So not everyone sitting in the room was rating them the same way. And so there was a lot of discussion about why they rated someone a certain way, why they And then ultimately, it was like we needed to have something that says, what does DESI say? What does this group who have been working together on this say? But one of the things, and when we got feedback from them, they were looking at if you were close, so if you said a 1 or a 2, and so you were close, or you said a 2 or a 3, they said that that was better than when we had scores and someone was saying 0 and someone else was saying 3. But of course, if you're looking for 3 being the target, there's a distinct difference between a 2 and a 3 as well. So it's just, we're going to try to do one more video in here and see how that rating comes out with a little bit older group. Yes. Okay, so for that was about the growth model and about rating them a little bit lower initially, or if there's a half of them are 2s and half of them are 3s, you end up giving them a 2. That was a decision as a part of this MEAS. So if there is a tied score, you are supposed to, and everyone across all EPPs are supposed to give them the lower score. Did that answer that?
Thank you for that, and certainly the point about is this being communicated all across the state the same way, that's the plan. Okay, let's take one more look, and again, you're still looking at the same 2 standards. This time we're going to be looking at a high school English classroom. This video isn't quite as long.
Is because Romeo is going to make a decision
Okay, once again, we're going to score standard 1, standard 5. You want me to just skip ahead and give you the results? Okay, let's do it. Time's a-wasting. Okay, for standard 1, the team came up with a score of 1. And the reason was there was some accurate content shared. There was a focus on tragedy versus comedy. Students were given a strategy for how to respond to questions. I mean, I think we heard a lot about that. But the behaviors that were contrary to what was expected, no time for students to process information. This teacher used only one strategy to share content, and few, very few, students were engaged. So do we have more agreement with this outcome?
So raise your hand if you agreed with that score. There we go.
Yeah, that was a hard one to watch, wasn't it? Okay. Hey, but look at how much growth is ahead for that student teacher. That's the positive spin on it. Okay, here we go for standard 5, which remember is classroom environment. And the team comes up with the score of, whoa, inadequate, 0. And here's why. Strategies used to try to monitor behavior were totally ineffective. That was a very chaotic lesson. Behavior interfered with instruction. It was limiting the opportunity for all students to be productively involved. And the teacher candidate was obviously very frustrated, and that frustration showed and was verbalized even. So it was like that was an inappropriate example of standard 5. So what are your thoughts about that? Would you have scored that a 0 as well?
So again, let's see a show of hands. How many of you agree with that rating? How many of you would have given her the benefit of the doubt and given her a 1? Okay.
She did try some things, so I agree with that.
You have one, I think.
I know that we talked at the beginning about the importance of feedback, and I'm just, I want you to take a look at that quote on the screen here, and I wish we had more time to talk about the importance of feedback, but I think most of you that have worked with student teachers in the past or know as a teacher yourself the value of specific feedback. So we're just going to challenge you to consider making certain that with each observation that you have an opportunity either face-to-face, as Jill said, what's that? Face-to-face, or through some other form of communication to give them some actionable feedback that will help them grow.
Okay, I want to talk just briefly, and I'm back at this colored sheet here, looking at the required MEAS documents. So this is what we have to have in terms of MEAS documentation that will be put into task stream will be this rubric that you've been using. And this rubric that you have a copy of, it depends on how you want to use that. You may take that with you to each session and that you go and observe, and you may do jotting down things at different dates of when you see things, and you have a record over time for that. But for the documentation of that, it will need to be in the task stream 2 times across the EPP. So once at midterm, which would be the formative rubric, and once at the end for the summative. And that would be both by the cooperating teacher and by the university supervisor. Now, when I mention that those are the minimal, that those must be in there, There are some programs who have more rubrics within task stream that they require their evaluations to be completed more often. So what I'm saying is there may be some distinctions between what's minimally required and what your program specifically requires. And if there are any differences with that, the program coordinators will share that with you in terms of what the expectation is. And then that is what it will look like in task stream. There is another form that's a cooperating teacher weekly progress form. This is, doesn't have to be done by university supervisors. It's in the handbook. Cooperating teachers do this. What you'll notice when you look through that is that it has been aligned to the MEAS. So it's looking at the 9 different standards. So every week when that cooperating teacher is doing some evaluation on that, they're actually building their repertoire of how that student is performing over time. And then they can kind of look at that together to do the formative, to do the summative. There is an optional tool, and that's the one that just got passed out to you. It wasn't put in the packet, it was just given to you now. You might want to write optional across it. It's the tool. And that really focuses in on what we're looking for in the skilled level, the level 3, and it gives you can score and keep feedback on there over time. When we initially went to the training, the intent was to put this in a PDF file and that you would be able to type your feedback in there and it would carry over time. It's not to that point for this year. This has been left as optional. One of the things you'll notice is there are, if you do put your scores on this form, you'll see change over time for the different levels, for the different standards, I'm sorry. But you're not going to see, well, what is required of a level 2 or a 0 score. You're not going to see those on this form. So this is totally optional in terms of use for this, this field testing year. The other thing that we've already fielded questions on is the artifacts. When, for example, when we first got the forms from DESE and I sent them out to all secondary program coordinators, there were some required artifacts for certain standards. Now those have been removed for now, because at this point it is an EPP decision as to whether there is a specific artifact required across the EPP. And that is not a decision we would be able to make during the summer when the faculty are gone. The faculty need to look at that and make that determination. And it's an EPPC decision for Missouri State. So at this point in time, there is no specific EPP-wide artifact required. However, there may be program-specific artifacts that they want to have collected. Or there may be artifacts that you decide you need to see in order to be able to evaluate them on there. So at this point, it's up to the individual programs. And if the programs don't have any stipulations, then, it's up to what you need to see to be able to rate them and score them. We do want to know, and that will be something looked at later, is what was used, what was required, what did you find to be necessary to have, and is that something that would be worthwhile to have across the EPP unit? But that's not something that can be decided as of now, so there is nothing that is required. But if you look at the assessment, this tool will give you a listing of possible artifacts that you could collect so that you could look at that particular standard. I'm going to say a couple more lines, and then we want to open it up for questions. That colored sheet on there is a summary of that, and some of those scoring guidelines that were talked about in the PowerPoint are reiterated on that sheet, so that you have that information about what DESE is requiring, how they are scoring things. So like if there's a tie, those kinds of things are included on that form. The other thing at the very bottom of the form, we know that after today and once you get in there, there are going to be questions that you're going to have. Diane is actually out in the field doing university supervision as well. So we have earmarked, she is our lead on that in terms of if you have questions, you can email her. However, all of our emails are on there, so you can contact any of us that you need to contact. And we will look and find the answer. When we were going through the training, and we were sitting and we would find discrepancies in some of the paperwork we were going through, Julie would put in a call, and Suzanne Hull called us back and had a conversation with us and provided some answers for us. So we're here to find the answers. This is a field testing year, so a lot of it is really to learn and grow and see what else is needed to be able to do this more effectively in the future. So what questions do you have? And hopefully we have the answers. Diane. Yes. I'm sorry, Steve, I couldn't hear that.
Okay, that is, by the way, that is a fillable form on the web page. But no, it goes in the student's notebook. It goes in the student's binder. And so it's reviewed with the student on a weekly basis. And then when supervisors come to visit, they also will review that and make notations from it. But that's, oh, well, the question was about the weekly progress CT form and what happens to that after it's completed. It's kept in the individual student teacher's binder. Yes. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to work from the rubric. The tool is here, but it doesn't have everything on it. It would be very difficult for me. You're going to have to flip back and forth. You're going to have to go to the rubric. Okay, what does a 2 look like? What does a 1 look like? I know what a 3 looks like, but for me, it makes more sense to work from the rubric, which is more comprehensive. No, I'm going to use it cumulative. Yeah, I'm gonna use it over time. But again, I'm gonna be practicing on this as well. So we're anxious to hear what tricks and tips you're able to come up with on how we might be able to collect data successfully. Yes. Yes, you could. You don't have to. Okay, again, there's some she wants to know, what are we going to write on every time we do an observation? Okay, that's the overriding issue here. And there's a lot of flexibility with that. It has to ultimately end up on task stream. But I liked, here's my personal preference, and you guys chime in who have found other ways to make this happen. I like to do a narrative while I'm observing, and then transfer that over. Okay, that was this. Okay, that was this. I saw that. And make it fit into the rubric after the fact. Because that's hard to navigate in the moment, but there's no one right way to do this. Right. Right. No, you're absolutely right. We give that feedback before we leave. And what I always do is I have my students make a copy of my notes, so I have something to take with me. I leave them with it. We oftentimes will make a copy for the cooperating teacher if she's not able to be involved in our conference. And I'll take something with me. And that's when I plan to then go back and see where these elements that I observe fit into the rubric. But that might not be the best way to do it. I don't know yet. Other ideas? Yes, ma'am. Okay, so that's yet another system. Could you, I'm not sure I caught all of your steps, so could you walk through that, please? I don't want to shortchange that.
Well, and other people may do it different.
Well, there are a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah. So when I go in and I'm visiting with the cooperating teacher and the student teacher, we have that initial meeting. We go through our guidelines of what we're following. And then at that point, then it's known that when I come back and I'm going through instruction, I'm going through and doing evaluation, I'm just making notes on my iPad. I'm just going through and noting things down, what I've observed. Okay, and then at the end of that time period is when then I may pull that rubric out, I may not. But then I'll go back, and then that's an opportunity time for me to sit down and visit with my student teacher at that point. And then after the observation. So I ask them, I tell the cooperating teacher, I'm going to need them for a short time. Sometimes it's a short period of time, maybe it's an hour. Kind of just depends on what your schedule is at that point. Usually it's not an hour. Usually because I come back here and actually teach, classes here on campus as well. But it's at least 20 minutes, okay? And then at that point, then those notes and the collaboration that I've had with my student teacher and me then goes down back to me, comes back to the office, and then I make those notes, formalize those notes, possibly go through that rubric, and then I'll go back and I send that then there's a documentation that I give to my student teacher, my cooperating teacher, and myself, so we all have that. I'd like to know is what sharing portal do you guys use? Do you use a Google Docs? Do you have an email that they send out? Where's your sharing document that you have all that information that you share so that you can have your cooperating teacher, your student teacher, and yourself, that you have something? What do you use?
And I do like the observation, then the student teacher and I step out, have our conference. I give them feedback in writing, and I make it the student teacher's responsibility to review my feedback with them.
I do it much like Kristen in that, we have the observation, then we step out for the conference. I give written feedback to the student teacher at that time. Then I give the student teacher a homework assignment. part of your learning here is to take the feedback that I've given you, explain it to your cooperating teacher, get the cooperating teacher's signature. That's one, on it. That's one way I'm trying to get them to internalize and review what we discussed. And then I look for that cooperating teacher's signature on that form the next time I go back. And as part of my first conference, I always say, I explain how I'm going to do it, and I always say to the cooperating teacher, contact me if you have any questions, but this is how I'm holding them responsible for explaining to you the suggestions that I made.
And I'm just going to interrupt just a second because it's 5 o'clock, so if people are wanting to leave or need to leave or whatever, but we will stay if you have questions that you still want to ask. Oh, and Kim needs to say something else.
I do just want to say one thing before everybody leaves. The reason I keep asking them to repeat the question or give a microphone, this meeting was videotaped, so you will all be sent a link to it so you can go back and review it, or supervisors who weren't able to be here will be able to view it. And when we send you the link to this video, I will also send you the link to the mandated reporter training that our students are watching, so you can see that as well, that Jill Patterson did. So I'll send that to you as well. Thank you for coming, and we'll be here as long as you have questions.